Curter to the point, because we have talked about a lot at nauseum. So maybe what we'll do is turn it over to the school, since you all are on, and Eric is the liaison, was at the meeting, knows what you did. We know the headline numbers, and we've updated a file here. So schools, maybe, Sharice, just what you did quickly, and help us put it in perspective for next year. Obviously, we don't know what next year entails, but we'd just love to hear the update coming out of that meeting. Eric did send some messages around. Karen did as well, and we have we saw your banded sheet, so we know the 95 was the numbers. We'd love to hear about it briefly. Thank you.
Okay. So as you said, there was the gap of 165. We spoke with Kevin. The town was going to account for 70 of that, leaving us with 95. So we did meet the request for those reductions, and we did that in 3 ways. The first was through the grant writer, which was valued at $15,000. This is certainly something we hope to revisit in the future, because we feel it will help us be more fiscally responsible and provide us with external sources for funding besides the town. After the grant writer, we reduced the FY21 professional development stipends for budgets for teachers. Basically, the contracts read that stipends will be paid when funds are available, and due to the extraordinary circumstances this year, we voted to reduce the professional development budget by $30,000. That is certainly something we hope is for 1 year only, and we hope we can go back to business as usual after that. And then the last thing was through technology. You know that we had originally hoped to have $110,000 in our operating budget. We had previously, through one of the iterations of our reductions, reduced the ask to $50,000. So what we did was we hoped to repurpose the warrant article for Math and Focus, which was originally for $84,412 to cover the $50K that we asked for as the funding mechanism. The technology is really of extreme importance to us. So as you will recall, we had the original 110 out there, but we would love to have this in the operating budget in the future. But for right now, if we had not gotten the ask supported by the community last year, we would not be able to engage in remote learning right now, because it's all dependent upon the teachers and the students having technology access. So next year, although we don't know what the school year is going to look like, we do know that there's very little chance of not having some element of remote learning next year. And we also have literally hundreds of devices given out to families right now so that all students could have access to the remote learning. And if you have kids in your house, you can picture what those devices are going through as they're being utilized in probably a much more regular way than they would in a typical school day. There's probably, orange juice spilling on them, pizza being dropped on them, cracked screens. So we feel very firmly that we need the $50,000 for next year to be able to account for maintenance and devices for both the teachers and students. And, we just have gone back to the drawing board so many times. We're certainly at our bottom for what we feel that we can reduce. Our priorities really are protecting the people of the schools and also the student experience. And we just, really aren't comfortable cutting any further, but we hope that, as you've already started recognizing, that we've done our share, and, we hope that this works with balancing the budget for you tonight.
Yeah, I would, talking on behalf of the committee, I know, we had a bunch of conversations on Monday about it, as well as Friday. We are appreciative of how hard these decisions are, and we do appreciate those moves. I think the technology piece. So I understand it right. The $50,000 you're moving out of the budget, but you're wanting to put on, see if the selectmen will put it on the warrant, and have a one-time free cash. At some point we need to, you've already said it. I'm not saying anything you don't know, and everybody feels it, but at some point we really do need to figure out how to get technology in the basement. I mean, it's been 8-9 years. I know we've used that as a goal every year, and I know when Karen was on the school committees, that conversation had started back then. So we do need to solve it. I know we're kind of trying to thread the needle here in trying times. Luckily, we're not making straight up cuts, but we do need to try to solve this technology piece. But thank you. We appreciate those moves. I turn it to the rest of the finance committee. Any quick questions on that, or we have a big agenda today. So we've talked about a lot of this, but Eric, Karen, or anybody else on the finance committee?
No, I would just echo a lot of what you said, John. I mean, it's a difficult process for all of us, and I've been close watching the school committee and the administration deliberate throughout this, and I'm very, very thankful for everybody's hard work and trying to push to get us to a place that is palatable, that we can get a budget that's balanced.
I would add to all the people on the school committee, Sharice, Scott, Steve, we know that these are tough decisions. We know that it's not pleasant to have to make those kind of cuts. Would like to get to the point someday where we don't have to agonize over this stuff. But looking forward, I'm not sure it'll ever happen. I think we'll go through this year after year. But I hope it won't be as agonizing as this year. This is a tough year. And I'm not sure where it's going to end, but I think it's going to get tougher.
Yeah, that's the concern many of us have. So schools that will Karen, yes?
Yeah, I was going to say, John and Eric and Boyd have already said a lot about how hard it is, how much work has been put in, all the considerations. It's too bad there aren't all kinds of excess funds to take education in the direction you'd like. I'm not sure when your contracts are up for renegotiation, but it's the people costs that really drive your budget, and it's problematic when it comes down to, do you give people raises like they're accustomed to, or do you keep technology in the budget, or, any of the other choices you've had to make? So anything you can do in contract negotiations to try to take that, it's going to be 5% every year down, can make a big difference in terms of what's available for funds.
Yeah, actually, and since everybody is on, I'd say there's just one more comment that I want to say just to from Monday's meeting. I don't know if it got articulated to you all, but it was said. I think that the town has been, quite supportive, very supportive of the elementary schools over the years. With the overrides, et cetera. And it's interesting, because we had to push back hard, obviously, on both Masco. We actually, Selectmen, FinCom, town administrator wrote a joint letter getting them to reduce their budget. But if you look back, and I only look back 8 or 9 years, the Topsfield share of the Masconomet budget has always been larger and quite larger than the elementary budget. And last year, those roles flip-flopped. And now if you actually charted it, the elementary budget is growing at a faster rate than the Masco budget. So that's a data point that's been, I was the one, if you go back to the recording, I was the one that brought it up on Monday, but I was not the one that looked at that. I've had several people point that out. So while the entire school committee's on, I figured I might as well articulate that has been noticed. And we were going through trying to figure out how do we get direction of, we pride ourselves in transparency and being supportive of everything in town. And so when we need to make cuts, we're like, well, we need to make cuts. We need to figure out how to get a balanced budget. We're like, that needs to be shared by the elementary schools as well as town. And we were trying to focus on that burden. But in those conversations, it was pointed out that change was pointed out. So we just wanted to say it that, I know some narrative is that the town, could be more supportive of the elementary schools. I'm proud that the town has been very supportive of the elementary schools. and that data point has changed. Now, we do understand that they're larger. There's a lot of other factors in there, but at the same time, I believe their health insurance, our numbers are not in those numbers. Karen knows more of the detail, but there's just a data point to pay attention to as we move forward. But we appreciate the moves that we made, and we're optimistic that we can balance the budget based on what I think Kevin's been able to do and some of the modeling that we've all been doing. So thank you.
I'd like to emphasize a couple of those points. As I said earlier, this has been a tough year, and I'd like to make it very, very clear to FinCom and school committee that this is not a FinCom against school committee. I want to make sure that wedge doesn't get driven in to the point that this becomes an us versus them kind of thing. And it's important to feel, in my opinion, we're all in the same wagon, and we gotta make sure that we all survive.
And our schools are most important, some of our most important assets. We've all talked about that. We all feel that. That's why many people have moved to town.
Yeah.
That's why many of us are involved in all of this anyway. We're trying to figure out how do we get balanced services to all citizens, the best services possible, being mindful of the tax rate and the tax burden. And, we don't want to bring up all those other things we talked about over time. Thank you for the moves. We're all in this together. We're working forward. I know next year is probably going to be hard as well, but thank you so far.
Thanks.
All right. So with that, Kevin, to balance the budget, the FinCom needs to go through and vote on the warrant. We need to vote amount over guidelines, and we have our little balance, our balancing tool that outlines the items that we have not voted over guidelines. I have in there modeled the 95 reductions that elementary has, and there's still that delta that we're trying to solve. So I know you've been working hard at trying to identify what those are. It's hard. It's a chicken and the egg. Like, we want to hear that you're there so we can then go through and make the votes. And at the end of those votes, have a balanced budget. So I guess I turn it over to Kevin, to you. What updates you and the town team and selectmen have on what you've been working on since, in the last couple of days, and progress you've made since Thursday.
And go slow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. And I just want to start by saying that, the last couple of weeks, we've really started to get close on this, and the work by the FinCom to identify and give us a target to shoot for when it came to balancing the budget was incredibly helpful. But the efforts and the collaboration with the Tri-Town in trying to jointly find a way to balance the budget was, I felt, incredibly productive. And I just want to voice my thank you to Charisse, to Dr. Morrison, Steve, and to the rest of the school committee for their efforts. We wouldn't be here right now without them. And like I said, the collaboration was much appreciated on our end. I also want to say thank you to the Board of Selectmen, as well as to Catherine on our end, for the support and for the work behind the scenes to help get us where we are today. And John, to your question or comment about getting us there, we're there. Glad to be able to say that. So we went through our budget over the last few weeks and really took a hard look at how can we balance the budget with trying to not necessarily cut direct services, and whatever we look at, we have a very tight budget anyway. After looking through it the first time, I recognize that, and after going through it with more detail, it's reaffirmed. But we made some really tough choices, but ones that are going to help us, like I said, put our budget in a place where we will not need to go for an override. So if you want, Mr. Chairman, I'll walk through the items that we're looking on the town side for reductions, and then maybe take some questions at that point, if it makes sense.
That sounds good.
Fantastic. So one of the things right off the top, we have a pilot program going on with our building inspection department And we had built in a little bit of a buffer into that budget item, not knowing whether we were going to maintain the change that we are piloting right now, which is a reduction in our building inspectors' hours and an increase in administrative support teams. The idea was to have the window open more often for the public to engage if questions come up, et cetera, and to be able to help us process permitting and everything else that happens in that department. So we made a reduction, we made a reduction of 27,000 and change from that line item of the building inspector, but increased by 10,000 and some change the administrative assistant. That is going to more correctly reflect what we think will be an ongoing dynamic when it comes to the building inspector and his reduced hours. We took
wait. So Kevin, that's $27,000 out of inspectional services.
$27,705 out of the inspectional salary building inspector. So
Okay.
he went from 7,667 down to 39,962.
Okay.
And then the administrative assistant went from 32,780 to 43,021.
Okay, thanks. I'm just trying to track it. That's
Yeah,
what I
I'm
mean.
thinking, so what's the specific number on that? 10. So 27,705.
Yep. And then it was decreased by 27,705 and increased by 10,241.
Okay.
So the net is, okay. So the net is 27,705.
The net is the 27,705, but then the 10 goes the other way, right? I think
Okay.
that's right.
Okay.
So 17,464.
17,464. Yeah.
Minus 17. All right. I'll update this with a new omnibus later. 17,464.
Yeah. And I'm just doing it, Kevin. I'm doing it in my balancing tool, and then for everybody, I'm going to pull his balancing tool up after Kevin's done. You can see my awful typos. It'll be fun.
The next item we reduced, we talked about the facilities management, and we were afraid of underfunding that line item, and we had asked for an additional $10,000 in that line item. We have since put a $0 amount to that. We'll live within our means. We'll figure it out, but that's I think
that's the one that we already voted over guidelines before.
Yep.
that's the one was already voted over guidelines.
We're reversing that. Okay.
Okay. And that's, okay. Right. That's,
10,000.
all right. That's in town hall. Okay.
That's in 15005 53052.
Okay.
And then the next line items of police chief. Fortunately, we were able to hire a fantastic new chief. As a result of the negotiations, there was a reduction of the salary in the budget from $130,050 to $125,250, a net savings of $4,800 in the budget.
Okay. Hang on. Thank you. So what's that net number again?
4,800.
4,000.
Okay. 4,800. Thanks.
The next line item is additional wages in the clerk's office, 16102511141. We had originally $5,000 budgeted in there. We reduced it by $2,000. It was approved with the $3,000, but we will be reducing that to $0.
So 2,000 savings or 3,000 savings?
$3,000 a net. 3,000 savings for the purposes of right now. It was originally 5,000, but we.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm just talking about the incremental adjustment.
Yep.
Yeah. So then what was that department? The 3,000?
Clerk's office.
Clerks. Oh, good. That's mine. Sweet. Okay.
Bingo.
Okay.
The next line was the additional firefighter hours for 24/7 coverage. We had a previous conversation. It's currently in the warrant, as you have the draft right now. Since the last review of that, there was indications that we all would like that to be in the base budget. That number was $65,000 was the original ask. We're going to put in the base budget $62,000. So that comes out of the warrant, goes into the budget, and goes in as as a net of $3,000 savings of that.
Okay, hang on. All right.
Except that in John's sheet, he had already scaled it back to 50,000.
I just moved it to 62. Do you see it here now?
Yep. Yeah, okay.
So the next line item, going back to the police, is the new police chief longevity. So I'm sorry. So we have longevity in the police department for the sergeant. During negotiations, the longevity is no longer part of his contract. That's a net savings of $15,000. I'm sorry, $1,500. He's not getting that.
Oh, okay. What the-
Got me all excited there. I was like, well, we're close.
I'm sorry, guys. I got you all excited. That was not the case in this one. He's not getting $15,000 in longevity, but that is a savings in the budget. And then the next one on here is a reduction of the town administrator's COLA from 2% down to 1.5%. That's a 134.
From what percent to what percent, Kevin?
2% down to 1.5%, representing a savings of $660 in the budget.
660?
Yes,
That's a big find there, Kevin.
that's my contribution to the town of Topsfield.
That's all right. Well, you know what? Congratulations.
Kevin's paying the bill.
Thank
No,
you.
I have to buy you lunch, Kevin.
Yeah.
Well, one of the big reasons why it's important that that the reduction was there is the next one and the last one that's going to get us over the finish line. So we had a 1.6% COLA, originally 2% COLA, down to 1.6 for our non-union employees. We'll be reducing that down to 0%. It was tough decisions to be made, but looking at the economy, looking at what other communities are doing, and understanding that we need to make sure that we're doing right by the town at the end of the day, as well as our employees. But this was the right thing to do. That was a $33,444 savings in the budget. That being said, there's a increase in the budget of $2,337 because that $33,444 represents our water department as well. And the water department will be seeing they will be seeing the excuse me, their reduction does not come off the base budget because they work within the enterprise. So that is a net of
Right here, Kevin. I can add these two
like
together.
25,000 or something.
31067.
Oh. 31067. Okay.
Hey, Kevin?
I got 31107.
31107.
I have 31067. I've got 33444 and 2377.
33444 2337.
Oh, 2337.
Yes,
Sorry. So that's 31107?
that's right.
Okay. I don't know if my labels make any sense, but I'm trying to keep up with you here.
Yeah, I'm just writing it down. If I have to hunt through the model to put it all in, we'll be here all night.
And I'll also say that the economic development planner, $40,000 is something we'll be postponing to hopefully next year.
Okay. So that the warrant isn't even going to show up, huh?
Unless the board and the FinCom feel like we should look for it as an override, but just based on our conversations.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the optics of that makes sense, Kevin.
That's why I went there. It was a tough one. I think, as we talked about, I truly believe in it. I think there's a significant amount of value that can come of it. Similar to the schools and the grant director or grant
Right.
writer.
I was just going to say that it's not like, the schools made the cut of the grant, forego the grant writer this year. Like we shouldn't be doing that for town too, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a bad idea.
So Kevin, and everybody else, Kevin, is that a good stopping spot? Let me just run through the sheet to see if we all agree that that this is everything's looking accurate?
All right. Let me just.
Can you guys actually see this sheet on your computer screen?
Yes.
Yeah, I can see it.
All right.
Yeah, we can see it.
Let me just show you what I did. It's a little confusing. So here is on the 21st when I put this, you can ignore this for now. This is just a little check so we can actually see the two numbers together. And then when Mike updates the model, he can make sure that this ties. So you can just ignore these two yellow cells for now. But this is the number from Masco, cell D5 that was certified and that we voted on. Here's your old elementary number, and I believe with your adjustments, it's now 9117902. That's the 50, the 30, and the 15, so the 95 coming off. Sharice, is that accurate, or Steve? The 9117902?
I'm just checking. Hold on.
Thank you.
All right. So, John, I have a sum total of 78,772 in cuts. Or not, yeah.
Well, Kevin's were 68,531 plus the 3. So yeah, that's close. I have the fire in a different line. So
okay, sorry, I took the fire out of mine. I had the fire already built into the base budget.
Right. So it's 68,531 of the cuts.
Okay, 68.
I was going to roll there in a second. I'm just checking on Sharice's number. Just give me a minute and we'll get
27, there. 10, 4,800, 3,000, 1,500, the longevity, 660, 31,107. All right.
Okay, so Sharice is checking that number. We then said, all right, what was the amount of over the levy in Mike's latest model, which was this 328,665. But the additions that are not in Mike's model are the request over guideline that FinCom has not yet voted. There was a potential unemployment fund double count that turns out it was a double count. There are the 4 items on police that we'll talk about in a minute, but we're going to have to vote on. There's the library computer, the Board of Health vaccines that I believe Che has an update on, and the inspectional iPad. So in theory, if FinCom voted in support of those asks, which I believe, Kevin, you're in support of all of those items going through, that you figured those are more important to keep than other cuts, right? So you made the cuts that you made with the idea of keeping these requests over guideline?
That's correct.
Okay. So in theory, if those were voted forward, then the amount that we would be over at that point in time is 360,269. Now, this is where we start diverting. The old track had, what our cash adjustment would be, the 65 for the fire to get to the 165 that everybody's been working on as a team to cut toward. So if you switch tracks to today's sort of illustrative adjustment column, we're starting at that 360,269. If the FinCom applied 260 of free cash, which is roughly 1% of the budget, it's a little bit more. That's a theoretical adjustment. And the firefighting, if we vote in support of the overnight firefighting, which is now 62,000, that brought us down to this 162,269. The schools made their $95,000 adjustments, which brings us to 67,269. And then the adjustments that Kevin ran through, assuming I typed those in right and the math's working in the Excel, that's an additional 68,531. So we're about $1,200 in the right direction.
Okay. All right. So, all right. So my number has us at 216 over still, but with the schools at their latest budget. But I don't have a lot of time here. Yeah.
The school's latest budget is the 9,117,902.
Yeah, 9,117,902, 2.3% over last year.
Right. So, and you had started at this 328, right? That was the amount your model was over.
Yeah, it was over 328 last, right. Mm-hmm. And then, okay.
So
Then you throw the 62,000 on there, that moves it up to
wait, what's the 62,000?
The firefighters, because we pulled that in the base budget.
Right. So if you look at my adjustments here, right? Check out this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So here's your 328 we started at.
Yeah.
Here are the 31,600 of amounts over guidelines that we had not yet voted. That if we vote in, that's 31,604.
Right. Okay. I don't have those in. Mm-hmm.
Did you apply the 260 of free cash?
I haven't applied the 260 of free cash. So,
well,
if I apply 260 of free cash, then everything's sweet. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. I missed that. Sorry.
Yeah. So that's like that's roughly the 1%, right? Then the 62 for the fire, the 95 saving on the school. You already got that.
All right, and I'll put minus 260 free cash. Here we go. Oh, look at that! Wow, I'm a genius. No, you're a genius, John. Okay, good.
Hey, Kevin, your math adds up to 68,531.
I'm eyeballing your sheet of mine right now.
68,531 is what I get.
It'd be easier if we're all sitting at a table together, but this is better than writing on the whiteboard.
It's correct.
Like your virtual whiteboard, John. Good job.
I knew it was coming, so I figured I had a couple days to pull this together.
Kevin, it's correct.
Yeah, I'm just, yep, that is right.
Okay.
We're good.
All right. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing here for a second. Let's turn it back to the Finance Committee. I would say, look, we have to go through, the warrant and the amounts over guidelines, and we have a lot of voting to do. And so the liaisons would be taking the point on, proposing an elementary school budget to vote on. The fire is in the base budget now, and we have voted it over guidelines. So we have to change the vote on that. Any questions for Kevin before we turn it over to let's move to the voting phase? So I'd say, I would say, Kevin, thank you for the hard work on that. Schools, thank you for the hard work on that. I think it's very much a collaborative effort. I think the Selectmen, FinCom has been working very well together. I think everybody's sharing the pain, and I know, Kevin, those are hard cuts to make. I know we've talked a lot about the human capital costs and the leadership that you are all taking on that zero move. It's meaningful dollars to people that are working their tails off for our town, and the effect that number of people has over the total number of people that are on the being funded is a small number, but that's a very loud movement there with heart and soul. So we appreciate that and understand, again, how difficult that is.
I appreciate that. Then I just follow up and just say we have a fantastic team, and last months, especially with everything going on, I'm just so encouraged by the people we have here at Town Hall. And I've tried to get to all the department heads, as many people as I could prior to tonight, just to let them know where we're at. And like I said, everybody's just so team oriented, and it's just very impressive. And I appreciate the work they do and the efforts they're all making right now.
Question, Kevin, tell me about the police budget. Is it still up 6.25%? Except with the changes of the police chief and longevity, is the patrolman wages still going up 18 or 19%?
Want me to take that, Kevin, or you want to take it?
So I'll frame it and I'll hand it off. So last couple of days, spent a lot of time on it. Worked with Captain, our new chief. Spent time with Karen and Shay and with Catherine, and trying to really get a better handle and scrubbing that. And I'd say at a high level, the analysis that I put together, I was looking at the budget number for the OT, which I think is the right number to use. And I was looking at the net effect of the changes that have been made. And I think generally speaking, overall, my response to that would be, I'm comfortable with the budget as it is, but I'll let Karen kind of get into some of the details of that. if you'd like.
Certainly. John, are you ready to segue or?
Yep.
All right. So you'll all recall the conversation we've had over the last few committee meetings with regard to the decision taken last year to add the 2 additional heads, full-time officers to the police department. Philosophically, the changes that were agreed to relative to treatment of overtime, use of reserves, things of that nature. As Che and Kevin and Catherine and I have been looking at numbers, what we uncovered, and Mike, this speaks specifically to your question, but also to reiterate what Kevin was just referring to. From an OT perspective, Kevin has looked at the current run rate for this year, and the police are coming in under budget. So in terms of the qualifying give back, so to speak, on overtime, they are in alignment with where they were intending to be. So from an experimental perspective, that is working. In fact, their reserve costs are down as well, which were the 2 areas that they were asked to reduce in order to trade for those full-time officers. So those numbers are in fact in alignment. What we found is that the representation in the appropriated budget for fiscal 20 that we are looking at, there is a number in their wages category that is actually misrepresented. So it's right now we've got 667, 366 in there, Mike, and I believe that's what you possibly have in there. In fact, if you go back to the documentation which Che was able to pull back on of the over guideline asks that were in fact approved, the final number should have been sorry, let me just get it here. Should have been 782.63 and 37 cents, which in fact puts them at an ask of 13 grand more for this year, and those are that 13,000 is in alignment with the wage requests for this year and the contractual increase, and it gives them an overall. If you run through the numbers of where the final numbers ended up after the approvals for over guideline, the give and takes that were on that sheet, and I can bring it up for folks to take a look at if you don't have that from last year. The budget they had that they were working from was $1,555,465, and this year's ask is. Sorry, my phone went to sleep on me here. And the number they're asking for this year is 1,571,617, which actually calculates to a 1.04% increase in budget. So it's actually the worksheet that's off. I don't know because I wasn't here when I don't think this meeting is where we necessarily dig into that, but the numbers net out. So let me see if I can bring up in the background in my email, or if someone has that.
If you just commit to the final number, if we take it from 1,682,799 down to the 15 number.
That's not what she's saying.
Okay.
What she's
So what
saying,
I'm
though,
saying
is that,
go ahead, Jay.
is that when you look at the numbers of what they had in the sheets we had last year,
right?
We had outside of the budget in the over guidelines
66K. Yeah.
We had, and that's, we can't, where is that?
It's in the salary reserve, and that was something that we had talked about Monday night.
Well,
Right, it's not
but
in the
there's two parts
police's
to
budget.
that.
Not yet. It will get moved at the end of the year. It becomes a budget transfer, and it transfers at year end once that account depletes to need that money.
Right. The idea that was a backup. It wasn't meant to be spent.
No. So that's not what I'm referring to, though. So
Yeah.
there is a specific appropriation vote in the over guidelines for an additional
Yeah, that was for last year's budget.
$115,000.
Mhm.
That if you add that to the 660, what do we have here? Sorry, I'm looking across several documents here, so bear with me. Let's find it again. think it's 667 if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, so their wage line item, because we pulled the captain up out of that as a separate line item last year. So the regular officer line item was reduced on the paper that we're looking at to 667. When in fact, if you look at the over guidelines vote, brought that up to 782. So there's a delta of 115 that is not sitting in our worksheet for this year. So when you look at their request for 795, it looks like they're asking for a delta of 128. They're actually only asking for a delta of 13.
Karen, I'm not really sure if that's the police wage, the police captain's wages that you're referring to, but the budget that's in there is exactly what was budgeted, voted on by the town meeting, and it's, I don't really know, like you're saying 115 is missing, but it's not.
Yep. It is though, is my point. Their overall wages that we should be looking at in comparison this year to last year, if you're doing apples to apples, was 782. That's what that line item should say. I'm looking at the over guideline that was voted in.
So if you look at the 2019, or rather the 2020 FY 2020 budget, and it's got a total, hang on a minute, let me pull it right here.
The 102 was already pulled up, Catherine, to a separate line item.
So what happened in the 2019, and we're still trying to figure that piece out. What happened in the 2019 was that you had a budget of 753,608 was the appropriation for 2019. They moved the captain out, which is 102,000. Okay, and funded the proposed budget shows this is for police wages regular, shows is 667,369. Do you see that, Catherine? Or
I'm just pulling up the FY19.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking at
budget.
FY 1920. So
this, when it was voted last year, the captain was not taken out. That didn't happen. He went in that line item, and it didn't get taken out until in the
2020, FY 2020 it did.
It did. It's showing as a separate line item.
All right, so it was
Still within wages.
Correct.
But it was pulled up as a different line item on wages.
Right.
police.
115 add, there was a 13 give back, a 60.
Mike, in your thing for last year, for fiscal year 20, the budget for police, the net total, 1.605, right?
Let me bring it up. For the FY 20, we came in at 1583777. Then we had this 66K in the salary reserve.
In case they did need more overtime.
Right, in case they did need it. Right.
What do you have for the final number, Mike?
So for last year, the approved was 1583777 for the police budget. Now, what I will do, and I hate doing this, but the budget approved over FY19, it was almost flat between 19 and 20 because of this big overtime thing we did. So as much as I complain about the 6.25%, the raise last year was actually quite humane. But I'm just chumming up the water right now.
So I'm just looking at the police still.
Yeah.
So I see what you're saying in terms of they requested the 115, and if you look at the 2020 budget, 15 line items over guidelines, number 14, 15, 16, and 17 were all lumped together.
Yeah.
And then when the finance committee voted it, they voted a reduction of wages by $40,000, and then they put the $66,000 in the salary reserve.
Yeah.
So what the budget represents, what the worksheets represents, are exactly what happened during last year's voting. Mike, do you agree with that?
I do, but I'd have to go through it slowly.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, no, I agree, but I'm
Yeah.
looking
But
at above guidelines chart from last year.
Okay. You're the only one that has that up right now, so I'm totally trusting you.
You're saying the net number, Catherine. But when I look at those other line items, they're nearly in alignment with what those nets would have been on at a line item basis. This is the only one that's off. We're talking about if you take the 115, you reduce it by the 13, the 64, and then the 400, gets you a net number.
Right, but that, I mean, what you're looking at is exactly what was voted. Mike, I'm gonna say.
Right, but what I'm saying is if I look at those accounts, Catherine, those accounts were reduced, but the one that was supposed to be increased was not increased.
So we had 2 officers, and I mean, we're really going to hit that. We're really going to hit the overtime hard, is what was going to do.
Yeah, and it was.
Yeah, you're right. But it was 115 minus 51,807, and we had 66,000 in salary reserve. So.
But the police budget doesn't hold any of that reserve. That's sitting elsewhere.
Right. They're supposed to come to the town at the end of the year if they needed it.
And they haven't.
They haven't. So so their budget, It isn't, that salary reserve wasn't something for them to do.
Right, and that's not in the numbers I'm giving you.
Okay. So the big issue I see then is somehow this patrolman overtime budget went up like 19%. That just seems.
That's regular time.
Yeah.
The number you're looking at is regular wages. It's $128,000 off, and that's exactly the cost of the 2 officers is $128,000.
But
so there's something up in the math, because what was approved was the hiring of those 2 officers. I wasn't here last year, so I don't know what happened with the math. But what I can say is the number that they're reporting this year and the number they have listed in their budget that they've been working from is logically tied to the 128, which is the cost of those 2 officers.
Karen, they receive a budget every single month, and not once have anyone from the police department come to me and say there was a mistake in their budget.
Catherine,
I'm not pointing a finger at the maintenance of the budget. What I'm saying is this is what was found when we did the math. That's what I'm saying.
we're trying to do apples to last year. And so, Catherine, we're not saying anything's wrong with that math. And Mike's saying that the numbers are way off, that these numbers are way higher than they need to be. Karen's saying that if you actually make it to apples, it is actually in line. It's just things have moved from which line items that they're in. That's what I'm hearing, at least.
Yeah, so if I do an overall review and the salary is what the salary is relative to, the wages are what the wages are, the delta between the 2 years' budgets is small. Like I said, it's 1% different.
So what do you believe the police budget is this year? Okay.
So the budget they're requesting this year, I was going off the wage numbers. I didn't dig down into the bottom line numbers in terms of but I would assume aligned with the, I did the math, subtracting out the pieces related to wage and salaries was the number I gave you, Mike. So it's that first subtotal under wages and salaries.
Okay, hang on. Let's go over it.
What I have is, hang on. And this is less the reduction of the 28 that the board and Kevin asked for. So it puts them at an overtime number of 140 instead of 168. That's a 28,000 reduction, and then adding back the 23,465 over guidelines that they're requesting puts them at, for the wages and salary, 157,617. think on Catherine, your document is 1576, right? And then at this point, we know Kevin's actually moved the numbers on the salary side as well by that $4,500. I have not accounted for that.
Catherine, does that seem directionally right to you?
Does,
Karen just said.
if you look at your budgets that you were sent for 2021, the level funded is 1,215,950. That's what was voted by the Finance Committee last year, with 66,000 going into the salary reserve in case the savings that were being projected was inaccurate. In terms of what their requests are or were last year, they did request 115,000, and then on several line items they had reductions and increases, but it wasn't voted that way. What was voted was a reduction in salaries of 40,000 and 66,000 set aside, and that's what everything that I'm looking at represents.
So can I just ask, how does that make sense mathematically? If you were hiring 2 officers at $120-something thousand, and you are saying you pulled 40-something out of wages and you were reserving 65 elsewhere, how does that even, that doesn't even logically flow relative?
But they were going to crush the overtime budget.
The overtime budget was reduced too.
No, but they were going to crush it, not reduce it. They were going to.
No, it was already reduced as a line item, though, is my point.
What they came in saying last year was that they were going to save money by hiring 2 officers, and it didn't make any sense then. So the fact that it didn't work out, that they saved money, doesn't surprise me right now.
I wasn't there, and I think now I'm just.
Right, well, I mean, I think we need more time to unwind this.
So I think the point though is there are 2 separate things we're talking about. They're talking about whether or not it saved money or not, and we do need to dig into that longer term, and we have some of that. We've talked with Kevin a little bit about that. But the other piece is it does look like when you look at the numbers, and Catherine, this is what you're speaking to, it does look like the reductions were taken out of parts of the budget, but the expenses were not added back in. So the expense of the extra 2 patrolmen is not in, I can't find it in our 2020 budget. You see the salaries for 2020 actually being less, well, being effectively the same as 2019.
Which doesn't make any sense.
Being less. So, anyway, I mean, I think the point we're trying to be is that we got to dig into this a little bit more on that aspect.
Were you guys able to meet with Kevin earlier today, or did that?
Yep. Yeah, so that's what we're speaking to is the numbers in terms of the expectation is that there was $128 or so thousand that were going to be outlaid for the salaries for these folks. That is in fact what is being outlaid for them, give or take, because of the timing in bringing them online. That has held true to that wage number. The overtime has held to what they were asked to hold to. They're actually a little under for this year. So Kevin's comfortable with the 140 that they're asking for this coming year, given that they've held to around 118, 120 for the current year. And, obviously that could go up a little bit in the next couple months with everything that's going on, but they've held to that. They've been staffing as they've discussed staffing with us. So I know this question came up from last night from one of the committee members. with regard to how they're handling staffing and doing 3-3-2 for the shifts. And if they have a reduction in any of those threes, they hold to 2, or they carry over one of those staff members to third shift if that drops to 1, rather than putting themselves in a position of overtime. So, they're managing to the agreements, and to the discussions last year. I'm, having gone through the numbers with Kevin and having gone through them and looked through what was provided by the police department year to date, without knowing what happened last year, the numbers look correct to me. And that wage number looks in alignment. And the only increase is based on the contractual increases and what we would expect now that those 2 new officers are beyond probation. And there's another officer that's had an educational increase. So, the 13,000 is in fact what the increase is from last year and what we would have expected to pay.
I just sent the FY20 budget to everybody too, so you'll have that. It shows the votes on it.
Yeah. So I don't know what happened there, but the actual number that would have aligned with these 2 officers being brought in puts them in alignment with this year's budget.
It would be interesting then if there's not enough money in this year's police department budget.
And they made it. Exactly.
They made it.
Well, I think because the officers didn't come on day 1, right? They didn't come on till later. They had some other shifts and leave, and someone left, right? Right after they came on board. So they had another gap. It wasn't very long, but it was a month. It's enough to cause some money to shift around. Like we said, they had 100.
But ultimately, whatever happened, if this plays out, to Karen Dow's point, it means that they, with a mistake in the budget numbers of what we did, they were able to stay to it or stay near to a lower number.
Mm-hmm. So they've proved it out and then some, if that was the case.
Well, but I think it reflects, we should be looking, okay, how were they able to do that? And why can't we do that? Something that can be repeated.
Yeah. I think we're going to have to look at actuals for this year to see, what actually flushed out. I do know, in looking at some of the actuals that the captain had given me months ago, they were seeming to trend a little better on reserve costs, on the OT, as Kevin has brought up. So they've been able to even more tightly manage the numbers than they anticipated they were going to be able to, and what was estimated for last year.
Yeah. Karen, how closely did the captain work with the accountant when putting together the budgets? I mean, did he just get put
this
out?
Year, you can go to past years.
Well, this year's when he put in this year's. What I'm trying to get at is, it seems like a lot of moving parts, and I don't know.
I mean, they have their own. I mean, they have a giant workbook that they work off of on a month-to-month basis against the numbers. I mean, in fact, that's how I was able to find the number that Che was able to pull up off the over guidelines. Was I actually went back into the police numbers and found that wage number, and we were able to tie it out.
They also attended all the meetings of the FinCom and sat through those and saw what was voted by the finance committee.
Yeah. So I think
again, I'm not placing blame anywhere. I just know in going through the math, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. There was something went somewhere. Whether it ended up in another fund somewhere, I don't know. I wasn't here. I can't speak to it. I just know in doing the math based on what I hear anecdotally occurred, and knowing where they're coming in this year, and that Kevin's combed through the contract and has done the math, and that is the number. And knowing that it's 128,000 delta from last year, and you look at how the number trues up to last year's number based on the guidelines, I mean, I'm looking at it just purely from that perspective. I don't have all the other noise in my, in my purview. It's just a delta of 13 grand.
Yeah, I just want to confirm that it did not end up in another fund, and I have a printout of exactly how it was posted. And based on the votes, if you also look at the attachment A of the omnibus, it all matches, and you're welcome to any of that.
Yeah. So Karen, what do you think the budget for FY20 was then?
For that.
Yes,
line,
for the whole police department.
I didn't calc the whole police department. I only calced the wage and salary number.
Okay, let's go to the wage and salary. What do you think the wage and salary number was?
The number I have based on that change, you had, I think you said you had 1583777. I have,
No, you said wage and salary though, right? So,
Yep.
Okay.
1555465 is what I'm seeing on the police's documentation.
And that's just salary and wages?
Yeah, that was just salary and wage.
Yep.
Well, that's not, I think, what was voted.
Yeah. I thought we voted the 1449.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I'm worried, because the 1449 doesn't account for the new officers at all. There's no money in there for the new officers. So I don't know what transpired in the conversations and how the whiteboarding was done, but it doesn't account. All I was trying to do was back off of the 795 and try to figure out why we were looking at $128,000 delta. And that's what it led us back to, is that number is sitting, there's a number of 782 sitting out in the calculations for that line item for wages for regular officer versus 667, which is 115,000 delta, which is what was in the guidelines. So that's where it kind of jumped out at us when we were going through it.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at what we're trending for actual, it's in alignment with that. So it's not as if they, I think we knew we were taking the 738 from the prior year, pulling the 102 out, applying the contractual wage rates for 19, from 19 to 20 to the number. And then you needed to add the new officers, and the new officers do not appear to be added to that number. So I don't know what transpired. All I'm saying is they don't appear to be added to that number. If you add them to that number, then you come in at the 782.
I think go ahead.
I was going to say, it looks to me, just looking at what Catherine just sent for the actual voted FY20 budget last spring, we made the reduction in the overtime. We didn't make the reduction in the reserves, and we didn't make the addition for the two new officers in the regular wage. So, it's not the full 115,000 that's missing out of the bottom line. We didn't take the reduction of the 13,000.
Right, which also corresponds
in the.
Does that mean they're going to be short this year?
No.
Either if we're accurate, it means either they're short or their budget they could come down. Right.
Well, I think, for instance, like we said, they've done better on the reserve number than they anticipated. So there's some, I may go back.
If you open up the spreadsheet that I sent you, the part that says over guidelines,
yeah.
all those for the police department were taken together, and the net was $68,000.
Right.
So that's where the 66 came up in terms of putting it in salary reserve, and the 40,000 was reduced. That was the sell in terms of getting the police officers, is they were going to save money by adding 2 police officers. I heard that repeatedly last year.
Agreed. But Catherine, what we're seeing on the to do that, we are seeing in the actual details, what I believe we're seeing is that we did make the reduction in the overtime. We lowered those things. But if you look at the salary line item, there isn't a commensurate increase in that for the two salaries or for any part of the salary.
Last year's FinCom budget.
And part of that is because there's $66,000 of reserve that they can tap if they need to.
Yeah, the number of months that they had those people in that role, because someone came on, someone came off, right?
Right. But the idea being is that if they, the two should have netted. So if you're going to take from overtime, lower the overtime, you are going to increase by the commensurate amount the salary wages. And what it's looking like is that we didn't increase the salary wages. which if that's accurate to the question that was asked, it would imply that if they're able to come in, that they're running their budgets lighter than what they're actually showing on the screen, on the spreadsheets. That there's a potential saves that we need to look at and use in the future.
I think to get us to where, even if we pulled in this, if they're 60 or 66, then their wage number, if that's how it was netted out, that was meant to cover the wages, right? Am I incorrect? That reserve, if it wasn't put in, if that house somehow ended up that it should have been in the 51130 and it ended up in a reserve fund instead, then it still should be added in for an apples to apple. We engaged those two new hires. I mean, they are on salary. Their salaries are attributable to that line item.
The 66,000 will go into the police wages. It requires a vote of the Board of Selectmen because it's a salary reserve line.
Yeah, so I'm just saying for the purposes of looking at it, it would appear to deflate the value of last year's number. Therefore, this year's number looks that much, the request for fiscal 21 looks that much bigger, is my point, right? So even if we'd said it wasn't the 115 and it's actually the 66, you're not at 19%, is my
right.
point.
And we did talk about that on Monday night as well.
Right. I'm just saying we're not at 19%. It's lesser than 19%. In theory, it could be as low as overall as 1% if you calc in all the other reductions that are in there. But I wanted to make sure we were addressing Mike's concern, which was the overall budget increase of 6.2%. And that is not.
So I know Mike's focused on that delta, and we don't have a time machine where we can get you up to speed on all those conversations that were had. Are we comfortable enough with the numbers that we have in front of us to vote on police tonight, or no?
I'm comfortable enough to propose. I mean, I guess the rest of the committee would have to. I guess I'd hand over to Kevin to speak to his level of comfortability with what he's done with the police to review their budget from this year and what their request is for next year.
Thanks, Karen. And I appreciate the conversation, everybody. I mean, there's a lot of nuances to it. From my perspective, right now, for purposes of our budget next year, that 795 is a real number. I mean, that's the number that with the officers that we have, we own them. That's contractual. The 140 on the budget number for overtime, I wouldn't put it down at all. I think that's a good number for our budget purposes going forward. So. From that perspective, I feel comfortable with those numbers. And then the four things that were not voted on prior to tonight, which hopefully will be voted on and passed. First is the holiday wages related to the two new officers. The $1,900 on the differential was new officer plus officer wages increasing by 2%. I think, and that's the contractual component of that.
83,464 in total. The 12, 2, and 5, 8450, 1,900, and 900.
Yep.
That's right. And then the 8450 officers plus 4 hours of additional mandated training for all the police officers is represented in that line. And especially pays it's with the I think it's the firearms instructor and detective and the student resource officer, which is all the specialty positions are at a certain rate. That position historically been paid less, and they're putting in there to bring them up to the standard of everybody else, because there's some question in the contract of why she's being paid less than the rest. So that's what those numbers represent. Again, I felt good with the explanations I received. Looking at the numbers, spent about 3 hours on the phone with Chief Hovey and Captain Hayward. Going forward wise, the numbers look good for me, and I hope the FinCom agrees with that. And I guess I'll turn it back to you folks to talk through anything else you might have.
Okay, so look, I know we have to figure out, what I know a lot of time's been spent on it. Again, I'll follow the lead of the committee, but I think that we voted the base of the police. Now we have these 4 items over guidelines we have not voted. You know, I'll entertain a motion on those police items. Karen, I don't know if you want to do it individually or as a group, but you know, I'm on the balancing tool, which is the list of, you know, if you go to Catherine's list of the items over guideline not voted, you know, those items are in there as well. But I think that's our list that we need to vote on. Like in terms of what we need to get done tonight, we need to vote these handful of items, and we need to go through the warrant. There's a handful of warrant articles we can vote if Mike's model's updated where we have the right numbers, and then there's a meeting. So I think we should start with the police items that are over guideline in that sheet.
Yep. So I was just pulling them up on the list so that I could speak coherently to them and the amounts. So if we're okay with me lumping, is that okay?
Can I interject? Can we do the superseding motion again? Do you want to do it or not?
Absolutely.
I move that any votes taken by the Finance Committee tonight can be superseded by a later vote.
Hearing a motion, is there a second? Second by Jay. Jen, you hearing this okay?
Yep.
Okay. With that, any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to a roll call vote since we're on a Zoom call here. So Karen Duvall.
Aye.
Mike?
No.
On the superseding vote?
Oh, no, yes, on the superseding vote. Sorry.
You're
Yes,
tipping your
yes,
hand,
on the
Mike.
superseding vote, yeah.
Okay,
Sorry,
Lou?
I'm wrapped up in looking at this other stuff. I should pay more attention.
Lou?
Aye.
Jay?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
And John votes aye. So I think the superseding vote's unanimous. Oh, Karen Dow. Sorry.
Vote aye.
You are not. Okay. So that passes unanimously. Now I'll entertain a motion on the items over guideline.
Karen, can you hold holiday overtime out? Do that as a separate line item?
Sure. So why don't I go ahead and do that first, or do you want to have Kevin speak to that?
Either.
Kevin, John, do you want to speak to it? You want me to make the motion and then have Kevin speak to it?
Yeah.
I know he has some commentary on that.
Let's do that.
Okay. So I will make a motion for positive action on police wages holiday overtime for $12,215.
Hearing a motion. Is there a second?
Oh, I'll second.
Karen Dow seconds. Okay, with that, any discussion? So we'll turn it over to Kevin.
So this line item was interesting, right? Because conversation we had earlier today asked if we took that number out of somewhere to be better represented, because this is a new line item in the budget, the holiday, OT holiday. Historically, any of the holiday overtime was going into, as I understand, holiday regular pay, which has a budget number of $63,243, which is held strong. That $12,215 is that represents the additional cost for 2 new officers, but then they would typically have gone into the holiday regular pay, as I understand it. They just separated out the holiday component of it separately, talking with the captain earlier. So the additional cost really is reflective of the 2 new officers, as it was explained to me. I guess any questions on that?
So just to clarify, just to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. So they work, they get holiday pay. It was going into the regular bucket. We've added 2 officers, so there's additional officers to pay for holiday pay. And some of that is attributable to overtime, so they broke the overtime number out. Does that sound?
That's correct. So they broke the regular pay and the overtime pay. They split the overtime out so they could better manage and monitor how the overtime for holidays is being distributed, or what the costs associated with it are.
So my question on it really is that, so because part of that whole thing last year was there was a separate line item we voted on, which was holiday pay for them. So I'm trying to understand, and the difference, and this is kind of what we talked about earlier today, but the difference between the overtime pay and the holiday pay, overtime holiday and regular holiday pay. So if I'm a worker, an employee, if I'm a police officer and I work, I get a holiday, I get paid for. And so maybe that's what it is. And in overtime is because we're doing 3 shifts. This is where my angst is. I thought, if it because they're doing, if the holiday comes and it's for that day shift, there are 3 people supposed to be on, they have to pay someone the overtime if they're actually working that time, that third person, the overtime. Is that what it is? I'm just not clear what that one is. And a bit of this is, really the police department needs to manage this. It's not our place to manage each individual detail, but I'm a little confused by this one.
I don't know.
I'm looking at, if bear with me for 1 second, I'm trying to get.
Well, Kevin's doing
looking at the contract right now.
I'm not sure what it is, but
Yeah, I think, just to add some color, I think while Kevin's looking at that, my experience outward of not just the police department is such that, you generally end up having people with seniority who take the holidays off. Mm-hmm. They're getting paid for the holiday. Someone's going to cover for them. It puts you into an overtime position. I think in this case, what they're doing is, they have the 332. They're trying to stick to that. They drop down to the 222 when they can. And I think this speaks to your Che comment. It's not our job to manage their scheduling process. If they're keeping themselves within budget and they're abiding by what they've, said they're going to do. But I think the case in this would be if we had just had them flatted out, you would have had an increase in holiday pay. This is just them happening to pull out the OT piece of it that is not necessarily attributable to the 2 officers. It's just that they want to be able to further, analyze it and manage it better, right? So that, we're seeing it, we're seeing what we expect to be a little bit of overtime that maybe we can manage a little better. Let's pull it out as a separate line item. If they had kept it all in one designation, we would be seeing an overall increase to that one line item.
So to that point, I understand. I think the point and it's really more for this coming year, is that if this may be what it is, and I don't know, and this is why I'm asking the question, is that they're trying to keep that the 3 people on during those holidays. But the intent of bringing the third person in was not so that you kept 3 people there, but by having the 3 people there, you could shift around to keep at least 2. So would it be an opportunity, would it be an opportunity in the future for Kevin, for you more than anything, would it be and for the police department to say, you know what, on a holiday, unless there's a reason, you should stay at 2 officers, don't have the overtime, and have that as a future savings. Because the whole intent was you have the 3 people on, but you shift that third person not to keep, if one of those 3 people didn't need to work, you wouldn't replace them for that shift. You'd go with 2. So on a holiday, go with 2. So anyway, that was my, I don't know if that's the case, and that's the only reason I was asking on it.
Right.
I think part of what you have going on here is we've got Kevin's new, we have a new police chief. Yep. Right? We have Chief Haglund, who's on his way, who's retired now. Congratulations, Chief Haglund, if you're hearing this. And then you had Captain Hayward involved in the budgeting as well, right? So there's a lot of transitioning that's happening. Obviously, Karen's getting up to speed and Che was off, and it's like the sheets have changed. So we're trying to just make sense of a lot of stuff. But
Hayward should still stay involved in the budget, from what I understand.
Yeah. So, Kevin, the only point I try to make with this is that at this point, because ultimately I don't want to question, is that if this is overtime for those people, for the third person on those 2 shifts, then it wouldn't it make sense to just drop to 2 people on the holiday shifts? So,
yeah. So It absolutely does, and that's some of the management will work through with the new chief as from an operations standpoint. I mean, I've already had Chief Hovey has been on the job for
9 hours.
1 day.
11 hours and 30 minutes at this point, but we've already had a number of conversations around, with the hiring process that we're going to undertake and being thoughtful around that and taking some time to assess how we want to go about doing that. And also on these overtime items, as well as the shifts and not filling that's huge, how they manage that process. So part of what I think on this line item, as I was flipping through the contract, so there's 12 holidays in the contract for the police. Everybody gets 8 hours of pay or 8 hours holiday time for each holiday in section 1 above. That's 12 holidays. In addition, employees who actually work the holiday as defined in section 1 above, either as their regular work day or on overtime, shall receive an additional 8 hours of pay or 8 hours of comp time.
Yeah.
So basically, everybody gets their overtime. They get the credit for the holiday. They get paid for it, and then if you actually work it, it's above and beyond. It's
Right.
overtime.
Right. Well, it's double time. You get
You're right.
Yeah. My sense is that a majority of these dollars are attributable not to overtime of new people. It's just that overall, if we had kept it all aggregated, that number would have increased because you're paying, to Kevin's point, 24 extra days of pay. That has a value to it. That's going to be increased over the prior year.
Yeah. They had last year, we had $5,500 in the holiday pay. So anyway, it's just, it's either something I don't understand right now, or it's might be an opportunity for future savings to stay to the, if you drop to 2 on the holidays, 2 people on staff.
And for what it's worth, like I said before, we have a new chief. I'm keeping a close eye on it. I'm getting in the weeds with the budget every time I open it up and going through with them. We're going to keep a close eye on this because the police department obviously is a major one of our expenditures in the budget. And we got to make sure, especially with the economy, the way it's trending, these are places where we can start making those business decisions or operational decisions that can ultimately result in some real savings. So
I would say, Kevin, I would say this. I've been on the FinCom for, I don't know how many years now, 8 something. I haven't been a liaison on the police department budget. I would say that this is an opportunity with a new chief and with you being new to get that budget as transparent as possible and as apples to apples as possible. I would say is imperative. And I would say if the committee, votes behind this and this stuff goes through town meeting, that if there's any of these dollars that can be saved, we imperatively save them and return them into turnbacks next year and figure out what the right budget is. Like I feel that we always get a lot of paper, but like you could see my little balancing tool. I try to take very complicated things and make it simple. And I would say that there's been a lot of time expended upon this budget this year, and I don't know if anybody's super clear on what's happening. I mean, I don't think any funny business is going on, and I think we have to probably support these numbers. And I think the numbers are what the numbers are with the staff we have on hand. But
if I could, real quick, John, too,
not as
from
clear as other budgets.
a management perspective, this is the first budget I'm going through. We're going to keep a close eye on it. We're going to keep trends on it, and next year, if we come back and we're like, no, we missed that, we can find some savings in the budget and reduce there, we'll do so. It's not as if we're not going to keep an eye on it if it gets passed. It's every line item in this budget, we're keeping a close eye on it. We spent a lot of time on it. So,
and I would offer that my conversations with both the chief outgoing and the captain have exemplified that, right? They're very intent on managing this on a month-to-month basis. They in fact get down to it on a pay period by pay period basis. They're very diligent in their management of this, and it can be seen in looking at the actual numbers where they are, this year thus far, and their commitment to managing to what they agreed to last year. So thus my support now that we've figured out what that delta was, that the wage was the wage and whatever happened with that happened. I mean, I know I had at one point said, I was neutral relative to those given that we were seeing such a large overall increase, but, under further examination, that's not the case. And these seem, to me to be very valid numbers based on their experience over the last few years and the fact that they've been very much in the weeds managing these budgets and the overtime and how they're managing shifts to control their costs. It is my feeling that we should be, purely my feeling, but that we should be supportive of them as they continue to work through what this means to have these 2 additional officers and where they can further reduce use of reserves and overtime because of that. And they're asking us not for additional monies for overtime as this would appear to look like. They are actually just asking to have better accounting of, in fact, that overtime so they can better manage it.
Okay, with that, any other further discussion? All right, we'll do the roll call vote. Karen?
Aye.
Mike?
No.
Lou?
Do we get a, I'll say aye, but did we get a second? We did, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
Karen.
Thank you.
Okay, so Lou said aye. Che?
Aye.
Karen Dow?
Aye.
And John votes aye. I think I got it. Eric, did I get you?
No, aye.
Okay, I think I got everybody now. Did you get that, Jen?
Yep.
Okay. So with that, Karen, next on.
Okay. I will, I'm going to lump the next 3 if everyone's okay with that. I am going to make a motion for positive action on the next 3 items for the police, which is the wages night differential for regular police in the amount of $1,900, police wage training in the amount of $8,450, and police wage specialty pay in the amount of $900.
Okay, hearing a motion, is there a second? Che?
Second.
Che seconded. With that, any discussion?
Sure. What is wages night differential?
So as people's wages increase, Mike, the differential rate increases because it's additive to their base rate.
Okay, but it says it went from 28 hours a week to 35 hours per week. So, I mean, why the jump in 7 hours a week? Because you're still staffing at night. Mm-hmm. You're still staffing at night with 2 people. So why did it go from 28 to 35? Because we're not putting more people on at night, I assume.
That's correct.
Well, there was some shift from, they were doing 3-2-2, and now they've gone to 3-3-2. So I'm assuming that afternoon differential. Kevin, if you can.
Yeah. Spare me 1 second.
So can we go back to the 28 then?
I think this is where I go back to, I don't find it to be our role to be micromanaging how the chief of police is managing his staffing and his scheduling.
All we worry about is money.
Yep. And, if in the course of this, they're trying to flux through to say, we're trying to staff 3-3-2, we dropped to 2-2-2 where we can, we're not pulling in reserves because it costs us more money, we're not doing overtime with reserves and the regular officers as much as we were before. If in this shift, it causes their shift differential to increase because they have some hours that have shifted off, my pulse on this is not micromanaging to the $1,900 on a line item or whatever it is.
Okay, so I'm just confused because I don't really quite understand it.
So what the police contract allows for is depending on the type of shift you're working, there's a differential pay that they get a certain percentage.
Sure.
And so this is a representation, as I understand it, increase of the, I think it was 48,000, increase of 1,900 to continue. The officers' wages increase year over year too. And so as that increases, obviously the differential increases as a result.
Okay, but what about the hours change, Kevin? I'm okay with it went up in the differential, but why is it 28 hours a week to 35 hours a week?
This is
There's a notation on there, Kevin, that says 28 to 35 hours.
Per
I think
week.
that's what's causing
It'll
that.
increase from 28 hours a week to 35 hours per week.
Bear with me, let
I
me pull it up.
I can pull out the broader. Hang on.
And it could just be the extra staffing now that there are extra officers to let you go to the 332 instead of the 322.
My sense of it, but he's got grave detail in here on stuff. So let me just get to the right spreadsheet.
I mean, I know we only talk about $1,900, but
Seems like an extra hour every day of the week.
yeah, but right. So are we actually putting more police on the road at an expensive time?
Well, it costs a little bit more for those off-hour shifts. It's built into the contract, Mike. So
I totally get that. I'm just talking about the numbers going up.
Yeah, so that second shift is where they have increased hours. I'm not finding that one in the documents I'm looking at. I've got pretty much everything else. Oh, wait, hang on. I might have it. Oh, good Lord. No, I think I literally have every line item except for that one.
yeah, I have in my notes from talking with the captain, it's a personnel increase for night shifts coverage. I didn't break out the exact amount of hours per se, but I know that we obviously have a 332 instead of a 322, and I know the percentage of what the percentage is the same, but the wages increase slightly. So I think that's the two components that built in that are the reason for the $1,900.
Oh, all right. So,
All right. Okay.
perfect information. We have a vote. We have a second. We have discussion. I know we don't have a perfect answer. So use that in determining how you want to vote, I guess. But it's 8:40 at night. It's the 11th hour. Our test is due, and we have a ton of voting to go. So I'm going to move us along, and I don't mean to be short with people, but I've been trying to let people go, I'm doing my best. So with that, we'll do a roll call vote. Karen Duvall?
Aye.
Mike?
No.
Lou?
Aye.
Jay?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Karen Dow?
Aye.
And John votes aye. So that passes. I think we're done with police, so we'll just move over to library.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Kevin. Library. So we talked about this a little bit last week. Kevin certainly chime in, but my sense is still exactly where it was last week, that we've asked all of these departments to call out actual cost, represent them, and be transparent in their budget submissions. That is in fact what the library has done with this one. It has been a buried cost. It is an actual cost. I don't feel we should be penalizing the library for having done what we've asked them to do, which is actually account for their actual operating expenses. So that's my 2 cents in that space. And I'd like to make a motion for positive action on the item for the library for computer expense in the amount of, hang on, let me just bring up my
4039.
I know it's 4,000 and change. Sorry, I just need to get to
$4,039.
$4,039. Thank you, Kevin.
Second.
Okay, there was a motion by Karen Duvall, seconded by Karen Dow. With that, any discussion? Oh, Mike.
We had the same comments as last week, so there's nothing new there.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, we'll turn to a roll call vote. Karen Duvall?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Jay?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Karen Dow?
Aye.
And John votes aye. All right, Board of Health vaccines.
So I got some updates from the Board of Health, both from the chairwoman of the Board of Health, as well as from the actual health agent, Wendy. Basically, the numbers they have, and Karen, Catherine, if you can validate some of these, but in effect, for fiscal year 19, which is the last year where they paid for the flu, the medicine, and they have their receipts, they're showing their receipts at $1,500, their expenses at $1,500, and their reimbursement was at $1,400 that year. So it was almost a wash. There's a number of reasons why the costs have gone up. Most of it due with the number of people, but more importantly, that the expense of the vaccine itself and the high dose version. There's a strong feeling amongst the Board of Health that these are services that are really important for a number of reasons, not the least of which is they enable us to be reactive to any sort of, such as COVID-19, and they are certainly presenting on that fact, any sort of flu, and that while you can go many other places to get it, there is no place else in town where you can get your flu vaccine. It does require leaving town. Finally, what they did share was there are at least 19 towns in our area they named that had a flu vaccine in the 2019 that provided at least one clinic during 2019 and 2020. And basically, you can't. I just be blunt about it. You can't. I can't find a town around us that didn't. This is coming from them, but if I struggled, I think Newbury maybe might not have, but everybody else did, all the way up to New Hampshire. Their anticipation is this year, because of when the clinics were, they won't get their reimbursements until between June and August, so they can't match off the $3,000 that they've spent so far, but they believe they will break even. Next year, with the $4,000, they're improving their reimbursement in their process. They initiated that this year, so there's an expectation of breaking even or coming close to breaking even. Basically, the problem is when you get when you come in to get the flu vaccine, if you have insurance, we can charge back to the insurance company. But we have to get your information to be successful at charging back to the insurance company, and we haven't been the greatest at that. And at least Wendy is saying that that's been a priority of hers to improve. So I think, not the least of which, let me be blunt, I really don't want to stand in front of our town meeting during a COVID time frame and say, no, we shouldn't invest in our town in vaccines and making it easier for our people to have vaccines. So I'm going to make a motion to support the $3,700 increase for the Board of Health vaccinations.
I'll second.
That's positive action.
Positive action on.
Okay. With that, any discussion? Okay, turning a roll call vote. Karen Duvall.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Lou.
Aye.
Jay.
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
Karen Dow.
You're muted, Karen.
Sorry. Aye.
And John votes aye. So that's unanimous. Jen, you got that?
Yes.
Okay. Inspectional iPads.
This is the $400 for the data plan so that the inspectional services can use their iPads in the field. We'll move for positive action for the $400.
I'll second.
So a motion from Eric, second from Karen Duvall. With that, any discussion?
I know it's small dollars, but what data do they need in the field?
So this will allow them in the field to be able to access the online permitting system so that in real time, if they sign off on an inspection on a Friday afternoon, they don't have to go back on Monday morning to approve that permit. They could actually approve it in that moment. It's a real benefit. The cost benefit is there for $400 to be able to offer that additional service to our community as they go through the permitting process.
Okay, we just had an inspection today. The guy came in, Glenn came in, looked at stuff, said, yep, go ahead, and then went back. I didn't see an iPad role in that, but it was just an intermediate inspection.
Maybe it was in his truck, Mike.
What? Yeah, okay.
Watching Netflix.
He doesn't have he can't do it because he doesn't have the data plan.
Right.
That's right.
Doesn't have the hotspot.
Okay.
Anything else? All right. With that, we'll do a vote. Karen,
Aye.
Mike, you're on mute.
Nay, no.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
turned out.
I
And John votes aye. All right. Are there any other votes? So let's think about this. The fire, we voted the old amounts. We need to revote fire, but now it's going to be in the budget, and the amount is instead of the original
62,000.
62, right? So we have it voted in the right spot above over guideline, but the number is 65. So I guess we need to revote for 62.
think, John, we're going to have a whole new Article 3rd budget with all these adjustments.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Karen might have frozen there.
So I know,
Well, we can still vote the departmental budget.
Could just vote
Voting Article
that
3,
we
right?
agree with the balancing sheet with all the amounts on it, and then Monday night vote.
Oh, Karen, we're losing you. Anybody else hear Karen, or is it just me?
No.
This is a
But
reoccurring theme.
So much for that Verizon update.
too many people. It might be too many people in our house watching.
I think what
I
she
don't
said.
know. I got 12 things going right now, and I'm fine.
So what we're going to do is we're going to use this balancing tool. Mike's going to update the model. We'll pull out because we're going to have to meet Monday anyway to get the letter finalized. We can vote the final top couple warrant article numbers, total numbers, depending on what all these numbers add up to in Mike's model. I think that's what Karen was saying, which makes sense.
John, can you share the balancing tool that we're voting on our screens? Does that make sense?
Well, we're already through the whole thing now.
Okay.
Or actually, I guess we could just vote. Yeah, let me share it. Hold on. We'll wait for Karen to get back on, see if she agrees. So here's the balancing tool, right? So we just voted all of these items here, right? We have, if we go over to our warrant articles, we can recash there. The fire is 62,000 is the new number, so I think we do need to vote that. Elementary, we'll do the total elementary budget because we haven't voted that yet. That's on the warrant list. And then these are the further adjustments to the town budget. So we have to vote an updated town budget. So that's the total Article 3rd. I think Karen was saying we could just vote the total Article 3rd that are going to tie to these amounts.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Zoom, somehow I dropped out, but yeah, I think we put all these adjustments into the master, Catherine's master, and Monday night we vote the Article 3rd budgets that will be in attachment A on the warrant.
Yeah, that's right.
If you want conceptually tonight to say we accept all the adjustments on the balancing sheet, and we'll vote the full budget Monday night, I think that's a motion I would make.
Yeah, I'll entertain that motion. That's a good idea. This is the sheet. This is everything that we had talked about, the numbers tied. We'll make sure Catherine has it and Mike has it right in the models for Monday when we vote the final.
Yeah. But that's fine. I mean, you had to go through the over guideline items anyway.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. So I make a motion that we approve all the adjustments as discussed on the balancing sheet and make adjustments to the master Article 3rd budget and vote that on Monday night.
Second.
Hey, any discussion on that?
I do. I'd like to hear from the chief of fire, if she thinks her budget's enough. And this is going to, and I just generally think the fire department's going to be asked to do a lot in the upcoming year. And I just wonder if they are comfortable with what they have. And specifically, I see them walking around in N95 masks, and man, those are hard to breathe in.
They are. I just want to tell you, it's not lost upon me what's happening tonight, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate the support. We're way behind in staffing. Everybody knows that. We're building up. We'll be fine. We have great people who are working really hard, and some really sad times in our town, and I just really appreciate the support.
Okay.
One other question for Kevin, just conceptually, a question, a comment. I feel really awkward about putting basically the over guidelines amounts we voted tonight, and to do that, basically we gave the non-represented people no COLA. And, I feel bad that the represented personnel don't yet suffer the same way. I understand that nobody's getting raises these days, but the represented people with contracts are.
So my apologies. When I was going through the list, I didn't dive into that much detail, but that COLA is relative to the steps. So every year there's a COLA of 2% historically over the last 6 years, and each of those step numbers go up 2%. Every employee typically has a step unless they've maxed out on their steps.
Right.
So the reality is the employees of Town Hall, the non-representative, are going to see about a 2.35% on average increase. So the COLA percentage of 2% is just strictly on the chart
On
there.
the grid, right.
The grid. So everyone is still being, so you think about it. So the union contracts right now are at 2%. The non-represented are going to be at 2.35. The contracted employees for the captain and the two chiefs are going to be 2%, and the town administrator will be 1.5% increase. So to give you a more depth look at what those increases look like. So, and
Not bad considering inflation is 1.
So I've talked a lot with the other town administrators too, and this is people are looking hard at their all the different places, and what we're doing, we're still I think we're in a good place. And in talking with the team the last day or so around what we're doing, the team fully understands sort of the dynamics of the economy, the dynamics of the percentages. So I do appreciate Karen actually making the comment and bringing it up, because it's always a very tough decision to make when you have to look somewhere like that. But and especially when you have a great group of people, but it's really reflective in them that they all said, we understand, Kevin, makes sense.
Yes.
We're with you. So
Okay, thank you. I want to recognize that it's not necessarily what the non-represented people were expecting 6 months ago.
True.
Yeah, I made a similar comment a little earlier, right when you first mentioned that adjustment. So that amplifier effect though is problematic, right? And we're seeing that across all the human costs. So we all have to grapple with this. So
Yeah, well, maybe it's a good start. It could be a benchmark for represented people to go for.
I'd like to jump in here if I can. I think I'm unmuted. Karen, the fact that the COLA has been eliminated doesn't mean those people aren't getting a raise.
Oh, right. No, I know.
Okay. And the fact of the matter is, speaking for myself, I can't speak for the Board of Selectmen, but speaking for myself and everybody else that's involved in this game recognizes that we got to do something about that pay grid. And we're going to be working pretty seriously on that over the next year, in my opinion.
Right. And the represented personnel also include both school districts that also have a grid.
I
And
understand, and
So it's not just, police or whoever that get shift differentials and moving from junior to senior, and that's their step.
Yep.
I understand. Thank you, Karen.
Any further discussion? I'm going to move the vote along here.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So with a motion and a second, we'll turn to the roll call vote. Karen Duvall.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Lou.
Aye.
Jay.
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
Karen Dow.
Aye.
And John votes aye. Okay. So that's got that. That was a lot of work to get to a balanced budget, folks. I know we're not 100% there, but that was we got quite a bit of the way there. So I'm going to turn our attention to the warrant list. I sent an email tonight to everybody with the agenda, the balancing tool, and now it's that warrant list. So we're going to pull that up. So the reports, the balance tools, and the balance transfers and the operating budget, I guess we're going to wait till Monday to vote what we can there with the total number. On these warrant articles, the math and focus is on here, but that's going to get removed.
Right.
And
And the technology is going to go in its place.
Yeah. Have we ever, I guess we can we? Karen, can we vote a theoretical warrant article? I don't think we can we?
I think it would be better to have the language in front of us.
Yeah.
I don't think that works.
Yeah. I think we should be talking about the schools in whole with the warrant articles and everything.
Well, we already have at some level.
Yeah, I know, but
Mike, what's that? What?
no, I think we should vote the warrant articles when they're written. That's all.
Right. So we're going to get the numbers in them, and then we're going to vote that on hopefully Monday. But we're going to update that for our model that we have, correct? Yeah. So the fire department staff we talked about, that's no longer on the warrant. And the part-time economic development planner, that's removed, correct?
Correct.
All right. I think we're up to Chay's article, the wild and exotic animals.
Lucky me. I don't know how I got this one, but
No, Chay's warrant article. He put it on there.
Yeah. I'm not even sure how it got here, but anyway, before we do that, one question: the non-criminal disposition of Board of Health. There is a comment there about rescind vote. I'm not sure what that means in the comments on the thing. So I just want to check. If you look on the tracking, on the warrant list version 4.14.3, it is a rescind vote with 2 stars.
I think we need to vote that. I think what happened was we started to take a vote and then we decided.
That's what I thought. It's okay.
We have to revote that still.
Okay. All right. So we can come back to that one after.
We'll do that one next. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So the exotic animals. So I read through it, and I'm happy to share it with everybody. I just got it today to read through it, and it is in essence cleaning up a lot of things, and it's actually removing some specifications that they had in there. So when you read through it, there is about 6 or 7, 8 different cross-outs, and changes that are in effect simplifying the statute itself. And if you start from the top and just quickly, I'll run through them real quickly. It just removes from this purpose the reasons why we had it, which was, and thereby preserve and protect the general safety, welfare, and health of the public. So that's just being removed. So it just says they're not allowed, not why. It emphasized the term shall include and strikes out, but is not limited to a couple other places. And through this item. The only one there of any real note is there's two of them. One is it takes away anyone except it specifies that the Board of Selectmen or their designees. Before that, it was the Board of Selectmen, the designees, or the Board of Health, the police officers in town or the town. Now it's saying, in effect, only the board can decide who's going to, or the board or their designee will be doing the enforcing. Whereas before, it could be argued that even if the Board of Health disagreed with the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Health could say, I'm going to do it. I'm still going to present a violation. And the other one is it just removes where it says the exhibits that are part of a duly licensed zoo and accredited by American Zoo and Aquarium Association, but it a whole bunch of conversation about, or the Mass Audubon, or the Mass Society of MSPCA, or New England Wildlife. And it says exhibits that are part of an organization that is accredited by the, quote, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, of which most of those are members. So that's the changes that are in it. I don't have, and I asked the board of selectmen, who I don't know where this came from. I haven't, or what the need was to make the change.
So the background on that is.
I can speak to that. So,
Dick was trying to say something.
Dick was trying to say something, but
Dick was trying to talk.
He was gagged.
There you got it now. Yeah. So you asked, how did this get here? It started out with an incident that happened in July, so a couple of months after it was created. Some questions absolutely came up as to how to enforce this, and the Board of Health got involved with it initially, and that's where they got concerned about it. So one of the things you mentioned was at the end of this article, we took out enforcement by both the police and the Board of Health. The Board of Health does not want to do anything about enforcement. They don't deal with animals, they deal with humans. The police were not interested in being enforcers on this in the first place. So that's how that got changed back to just the Board of Selectmen. The issue about the zoo, whichever organization is involved as an exemption, the important thing was to come up with something that was definable. And that particular organization, AZA, has a website, does have the particular organizations that they approve. And so that's something solid that you can turn to say, is it on the list or not on the list? One other thing that was changed also was the removal of hybrids. We don't want to have to do a DNA test of some animal to determine whether it has some part in it that was hybrid of some domestic animal in the past or whatever. So that's why those words were taken out. We also took input from the fairgrounds because they do a lot with animals. So mix between what the Board of Health was asking for and what the fairgrounds indicated were concerns that they had. In final analysis, the fairgrounds things were removed. We put a couple in there that they had asked for, but there was some pushback on it from the original people that put this forward last year. But that's kind of a background. If you've got any questions about any of the detailed ones, I'll be glad to discuss them.
You make a motion, Jay?
Make a motion to for positive action on the what number is it? I've got the thing up, not the tracker. Here we go.
28.
Motion to the 28th. Amend general bylaws, wild and exotic animals for positive action.
Second.
Okay. Hearing a motion in a second. Any discussion? I should say.
Has attachment B been circulated? I just personally am not comfortable in voting on it until I see the language. Maybe it's just me. I need to read it.
Yeah, do you want to? I can forward it on now. I just, like I said, I got it today.
I can try to read it real quick, but I'd rather just keep the meeting going. I'll just.
Jay, show that to Lou. There's something I thought of for a second. So send that to everybody on our email thread so people can read it right now. But Eric, where's Eric? Menzer is here. Oh, there you are.
Right around that.
A motion on the elementary schools because I think historically I've had we voted it on its own, just so it's voted, and then we do the overall Article 3. Okay. Now, and we'll do that on our meeting early next week. So I would ask to make a motion on what the total elementary school budget is, which is that number that we have in our sheet.
Yep, sure. I'll make a motion for positive action to affirm the elementary school's budget as voted of $9,117,902.
Second.
Okay, hearing a motion in a second. It was Eric and Karen Dow. Jen, is there any further discussion?
Sure. I think they should make guideline, and then if there's a override, that should be. I know we're trying to have no overrides, but traditionally the schools have always gone on override to the voters if we went above the guideline.
They're below the guideline right now.
No, they're not.
2.3%.
Well, their operational budget's up 4.7%.
So is that how we typically define it, though?
But Eric, I don't want to get into. We've all talked about this. It's water under the bridge. A lot's changed. So no more talk on the one-time sped treatment. And Mike, we have had times where we have voted in elementary school budgets over guideline without it going to a.
Okay. It's just in my experience that you're okay.
Yeah, so it's. We've been asking the schools to get down to a number. We try to balance a budget without an override. You know, if they were 80 grand off, 100 grand off, then that would go to an override. In some years, it's anything over the guideline that goes to an override. In some years, the finance committee votes a number slightly above guideline, and then the delta has been on an override. So, and that's just my 8 years of experience. But I hear your point, though. I mean, I'm not trying to.
Yeah.
It's a fair point that they, depending on, I'll say it as clearly as I can. So the guideline was 3%, holding harmless for one-time sped, which means in most years the one-time sped's been going up. When the one-time sped goes up, the budget goes up. They thought they were going to go for an override. Turns out now we need them to hit their guideline, and it turns out that the one-time extraordinary special ed number is smaller, which has caused the frustration. So I don't want to reopen that wound anymore.
So I think they should. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Any further discussion? Okay, I'll turn to a roll call vote. Karen Duvall.
Aye.
Mike.
No.
Lou.
Aye.
Jay.
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
Karen Dow.
Aye.
And John votes aye. So, Jen, did you get that vote? 6-1 to 0? Yeah. Okay. All right. So with that, did you get the language around?
It's been sent out, but do you want to can we go back and just do, while he's looking at it, do you want to just do the previous one?
Sure. Let's go for it.
So this one also we've got, so they are asking for, I pull it up. They're a non-criminal disposition from the Board of Health. So Article 27 is talking to and asks that the Board of Health is able to enforce any of their general rules, violations of any of our bylaws associated with the Board of Health, with a non-criminal fine. I'll call it a fine. They call it disposition, but it's charging you money of 25 for a first violation, 50 for a second, and third and subsequents, or 100. This is something that there are towns around that do have. There are towns that do not. The reasoning that the Board of Health wants this is that their only recourse at this point is to take someone to court and to go into the legal system, which then not necessarily applies criminal, but it requires lawyers and it requires significant additional effort. That's their justification. I would also like to hear from the Board of Selectmen members who are here what their thoughts are on this. It does grant authority for a part of town to issue violations. There is, I spoke with Kevin about it yesterday, and he did speak to, and also the Board of Health. They both spoke to in the past few days, making sure that it's all accountable and that this is only giving the authorization. They would then have to create a policy associated with it and a procedure. This just allows them to go forward with that. Kevin, is there anything else I can?
Yeah, the trigger for this, a few months ago, we had a specific issue. It's not unusual this happens, but as an example, Board of Health was called into a multifamily. While there, inspectors or agents saw there was no smoke detectors. Pretty simple. Wrote them a letter, said, we'd like you to put smoke detectors in, and it gets violations. No response. Second letter, no response. Third letter. Now it's a safety issue. If there's a fire and we know about it and we're not getting a response, the next step to take is going from a letter to a pretty hard stick by taking a criminal offense out on that person and taking them to court. Costs the town money to hire a lawyer, etc. So one of the reasons this was put forward was as an option for everyone to look at. The Board of Selectmen passed it and brought it to you folks for you folks to look at and to pass it. If it's you're act in a favorable, a motion of favorable in favor of it. But the bottom line is it gives us that intermediary step that allows us to associate a fine. I've seen in my experience, a lot of times that is what gets people to start pay attention is when you start hitting them in the pocketbook or the wallet. And I can't say the example I started the comments by would have made a difference per se, but it certainly would, for some people it would, because the letter's asking versus a fine associated. We've seen that in the building inspectors with a sign downtown. For multiple years, we were trying to get a sign removed. And then once we started associating fines with it, the sign was removed within a week. So that's sort of what the genesis was of getting here. And Jay did a great job sort of explaining what it means. So I'll stop talking now.
So the town of Topsfield has a number of bylaws that include non-criminal disposition. In other words, there's the people at town meeting hear about something. This is a particular type of violation, and the town says, okay, that's what we will charge people for doing that violation. Or no, we really shouldn't charge people a fee for that. People are pretty good in Topsfield about taking care of those things and don't do it. So in fact, all of our non-criminal dispositions have been specified in our bylaws where they apply. We have twice before, in about 2007, 2008, an attempt to put on this blanket type non-criminal disposition on whatever a particular group wants to put on without having the town agree to those particular things. And it was noted that a little bit too much power in the hands of some people in an organization, essentially a bureaucratic organization, and it was voted down. Here's an attempt some 10 years later to do the same thing. I think the rules still in the town of Topsfield stay the same. If people want it, they will vote for it at town meeting. And for example, in the case of the Board of Health, if they would want to have certain items as listed, then we could do it as a table and let the people vote to say, okay, those items are the things that I will get charged for if I don't do them. When we do these things, it is a bylaw, and it's very tempting to look at the people who are part of the Board of Health organization today, including the agent, because this is for all the agents, and we do get agents from outside that we bring in, especially for the Topsfield Fair. but we do think about it as people. But we're making a law here for the future, not for the people that are there now, but for all the people that are there in the future. And I say you bring it in front of them. Now, you say, well, what sort of things could happen, Dick? One of the things that's part of their regulations, and this doesn't say their regulations, this says that they have the authority to do it, because their regulations don't talk anything about fire smoke detectors. That's not part of their thing. So that gives them the power. Oh, I think that's a bad thing. I'll do it. Well, wait. Well, what if we limited it just to their regulations? For example, one of their regulations is that you cannot have a disposal in your kitchen. Okay, well, maybe we should put it there. Well, there's another one that says if you don't pump you need to pump your septic system every 3 years. Well, what if we put it for that? We should bring that in front of the people and let them decide. Because if, in fact, the board sometime in the future says, yeah, we have to start charging when people don't pump their septic tanks every 3 years. Well, how bad could that be, Dick? Well, how do they know? Well, they get reports from the people who pump septic systems, and it's a state law that septic system pumpers must tell the boards of health when they pump. So essentially they know if they want to go back through the records as to when somebody pumped.
Yeah, but it might not need to be pumped.
Very simply, they can say, you didn't pump, you need to pump. Oh, well, I'll go get somebody to do it. Okay, well, let's see, that's today. You better get them pretty fast, because the second day is a fee of X amount of dollars, and the third day there's another fee, and every day that you don't pump is a fee. And if it takes me a week to get it, I could have a pretty big fee. That just points it out, and I'm sure people will stand up and say, oh, we'd never do that. But remember, we're creating a law. This is not something that says the discretion is there to allow it in the future. So it's that sort of thing, and I think it'll be a lot of discussion, as we've had two times before, that the town of Topsfield to decide they really don't want to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Gannon. Anybody else on the FinCom with questions, discussion topics here?
I'd like to make a comment, please, Mr. Chairman.
Just keep it relatively short, but I'm listening.
It'll be short. Board of Selectmen voted for this thing. It's just another tool to let the Board of Health do what they need to do to avoid going to court.
And I just want to clarify, it is the health agent's responsibility under the housing code, believe it or not, to enforce smoke detectors. So that is the health agent's authority.
Well, would you like to narrow this just down to smoke detectors so we address the problem that caused it?
Yes.
I suspect there are other things that are perfectly reasonable that they have trouble enforcing too.
Every town,
maybe they should list it though. This is pretty broad.
Every municipality has this bylaw on the books. It saves resources. You don't have to hire lawyers to go to court. You don't have to enforce it. You can waive the fees. It's a money saver in the long run.
And if there's a silly regulation, we ought to be talking with the Board of Health about changing the silly regulation. Is there a motion?
It does have the article, chapter 30, which does have 2 items in it that have non-criminal disposition. So they already have, so to speak, an envelope in which to put an additional item such as smoke detectors or whatever you may want to have in there.
Right. I mean, my sense is this: the only example that's ever been brought up is the smoke detectors at this one place, and I get it. It would be nice to know how big the problem is.
To Mike, be fair, I got this one right when I started, and I would imagine we'll have other types of situations over time that in the first month on the job we already had a situation that popped up. I can't say from my experience, obviously, because it's limited how often it would happen in Topsfield.
Well, I'd like to
it never happens. I mean,
Kevin, I'd like to collect the data instead of imagining it, because I could imagine a lot of stuff too, right? I mean, I don't know, when the neighbor's dog does a big business on my lawn, is that a Board of Health thing?
It's just a tool in the toolbox.
It's going to the animal control.
Yeah.
So Che, did you make a motion on this?
Sure. I make a motion for positive action on amendment on warrant article 27.
Second.
20,
Okay, so Che made a motion for positive action on Article 27. Who seconded? Lou. Ross seconded. Jen, did you get that?
Yes.
All right. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll turn to a vote. Karen, Duvall,
Aye.
Mike,
No.
Lou,
Aye.
Jay,
right.
Eric,
Aye.
Karen Dow,
Aye.
and John votes aye. Okay, Article 28, the exotic animals. Lou, did you get a chance to look at that?
I did. Thank you, Che.
I looked.
It was very helpful.
I did too.
Do we still have a motion on the table, or?
I'll re-put the motion out if you're good with it.
I'm good with it. I don't have any questions.
Yeah, so Jen, you should already have this, but Jay, just restate.
Motion for positive action on Article 28, wild animal.
Second.
And Karen Dow seconds it. All right, so with that, any further discussion?
I just have a quick question, if I may. How does this, as I went out to look at the Association of Zoos and whatnot, how does this affect the demonstrations that are done at the Autobahn? If people are having birthday parties with curious creatures, things of that nature, I don't see them being covered by that exemption.
It explicitly lists out the animals that it does cover. So it's elephants, lions, tigers, ocelots, cheetahs, jaguars, cougars, lynx, bears, giraffes, camels, zebras, and kangaroos, and primates other than humans.
So those are the only animals that are involved.
Yeah, and one of the things it emphasizes down here is, in effect, saying that just below that, the domesticated animals are exempt. Any non-domesticated animals that are not in the list up above are exempt.
Right. But I'm fine with this. I think it's interesting. You could have a cobra or a python.
Could I just answer?
Mike, there's a long list of things I can imagine that are interesting.
Fall outside that, yeah.
That dog that dumps on your neighbor.
Oh, okay. Enough. Okay, with that, we're going to turn to.
Could I answer Karen's question?
No, I got my answer.
You
I'm
asked
fine.
about the birthday parties, for example. This doesn't change it, and it's been known that if somebody brings something to a birthday party, then they can be fined for this. And when it says primates, non-human, that would include a monkey. So if somebody had a monkey that was, but we're not. It's existing already. That's the way it is. We're not loosening that up. But as we voted for it last year, that was the case, and everybody kind of knew it.
Right.
Yeah,
I just
we
wanted
don't want to have the Tiger King.
make sure that the exemption wasn't becoming so narrow by taking the broader language out that we were actually creating the opposite issue, right? That we were going to limit something we didn't intend to. So I'm fine if it's referencing that pure list of just those animals.
It still is. Those lists remain in there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll roll call vote. Karen Duvall?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Jay?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Karen Dow?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So that's Article 28. So I think the last three on these, I think we can vote 33, 34, and 35.
Well, do you want to vote 34?
Yeah.
I thought we were going to put some extra money in.
Yeah,
We
that's
gotta
right.
sort of sort that.
We could just vote those with Article 3 early next week.
Sure.
What do folks want to do?
I mean, they're just generally they wave through every time, right?
Quick question, just for clarity's sake too. The capital items which we reduced, I think it ended up being about 129,000 total, reduction of 170. With those funds, there was a conversation early in the process. I think the FinCom was part of it, where we talked about those funds possibly going into stabilization.
That's what we're just talking about.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies.
That's what we're just talking about. That's why we might just wait till we have all the final numbers just to look at it one last time, because these are, Mike, these are the final, we have placeholders in your model for all three of those right now.
Yep.
And I think we could do a final tweak as we do final voting on that.
Sure. Yeah, it'd be good. It would be good to integrate the new omnibus.
Okay. So that's what we'll do. We'll make sure all the models tie out before we do that on cleanup voting on And I'll break the bad news now. Our meeting is not going to be on Monday. It's Tuesday. There was a posting snafu.
That's okay. That's fine.
But I'm not traveling Tuesday, so my calendar in the evening will be free.
Yeah, I'm not traveling either.
Hopefully others are in the same boat.
Wait, let me look.
How do you tell the difference?
What day is it?
It's work day or not work day? I mean,
So,
Even then,
yeah.
I changed my
Some of us,
background,
it's
so I
always
feel
not
like I'm
working,
traveling.
so Tuesday will be our cleanup voting day, and Mike, that'll give us an extra day to coordinate with Catherine to be sure my
Okay.
sheet, her sheet, all tie.
All right.
Right?
I'll try and get to the model tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah.
But I've got my mornings kind of tied up.
With
So-
work. Oh,
Nice one, Shay. I like that one.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm in Oregon right now. My background is Timberland
Maybe I'm going to cut my own hair. That's what.
in
Maybe.
Oregon.
Okay, I think we're going to go. I'm trying to keep folks focused here. I know we're getting a little giddy here. But we have the special town meeting that we haven't really spent much time talking about yet. And I think we have to assign these as well. So Jen, can you add to the warrant tracker the special town meeting? There's only a few items, so it's not as many.
Well, 4 actually reports, and then
Right.
which don't count.
right.
In prior year bills. So it's really, in the budget transfers, I don't think we can, so it's really Article 4th that we can vote, correct?
4th and 5th.
4th and 5th.
And 2 and 3 are traditionally, I thought, yours, John, or maybe they're Mike's.
Yeah, I think, yeah,
what
2.
are we referencing right now? Sorry.
The special town meeting. warrant.
STM.
Yeah, okay. Sorry.
You have that in front of you. It was in, I didn't resend it around. It hasn't changed, but it was in the, one of the.
Last week. Yeah.
Yeah, I just need to pull it up of my mini.
Yes.
Last Sunday, 4/26.
Indeed, a really big screen to do FinCom.
All right. So Jen, for the tracker, Article 2nd and 3rd are mine. You know, that means I'll get up to the town meeting and read them. Article 4th, police.
Oh, the radios, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, who's the police one? It's either Karen or.
Yep.
Karen Dow does fire.
Yeah, I've got 5th, but Karen Duval's got.
Oh, right. In this one, it's a twofer. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm still trying to find the document here.
Yeah,
I had
so-
downloaded it.
Jen, for the tracker, Article 4th is Karen Duvall. Article 5th is Karen Dow.
I got it.
Tuesday, Sunday, there we go.
Karen's finding the article to review it and potentially make a motion. So that's what we're doing.
Does the motion need to be, say, where it's being transferred from?
It does, it does list where it is.
Oh, I see what you're saying, in the table. Yeah, great.
Yeah, you can say
Didn't make it that far before I asked the question.
Right.
You didn't read it on Sunday when I sent it to you.
I did.
I did actually. I just can't remember that far back.
Oh, good Lord.
I brought up the wrong.
So we didn't vote this one already? I swore we already didn't.
Oh, no, this is a pretty tame STM.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So this is for the replacement radios. All right.
We talked
Sorry.
about this.
Yes, we did. We did. Okay.
It's all stuff we've talked about. We've known the dollar amounts. It's just, it didn't show up on, it wasn't on the, it's not on the current draft of the warrant. It's over on the STM. Just, it was
Okay. Gotcha.
we're going to put it on the warrant by the selectmen.
So this is a recommendation to transfer. Okay. All right. So
What we kind of, it's like money that was not spent in the current year, fiscal year, to be spent we kind of coined the term.
for this shifting. Yep. Get it.
And cleanup of old warrant articles.
Before
that we
you
know we
do,
don't need the money anymore.
before you do, I know we can also do it afterwards. This question. The third item is 1250 is coming from Emerson Field. What year or where's that coming from?
Oh, I can help you with that one. The town's not renting Emerson Fields anymore.
Right, but we always used to do Emerson Field as a separate warrant item.
Yeah, but I think they stopped paying them this year because there was a kerfuffle with the church renting the fields out to a soccer club. The Aztecs, Kevin.
This is FY20 annual what we allocated it for FY20.
Yes. To be
Okay. That's all. Got it.
That's yes.
So there could be an FY20 article number on that.
Yeah.
So just help crutch me through this because, so is this like we've been doing, just recommending positive action?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you
do this the night before the meeting. So
the article.
You gotta read that transfer, right? So it's
yep.
This amount from here, this amount from here, this amount from here to here, and a total of this.
Gotcha. All right. So I'm recommending positive action on Article 4 for the police radios, and it would transfer and appropriate a sum of $869.74, of which $7,563.68. I'm slightly dyslexic, sorry. Is being transferred from the FY16 Town Hall Building Design.
Article 18. Yeah.
Through 18, is that what that is? Yeah. Oh, annual 18. Gotcha. Yep. The fiscal year 20 annual 19 Town Hall computer workstations in the amount of $5606, and the annual article for Emerson Field lease for $1,250, totaling $8869.74.
Yep. Second. Ken, did you get that? Chase seconded it. Yes. Okay. Any discussion? Okay. With that, we'll go to a roll call vote. Karen Duvall.
Aye.
Mike Hartman.
Aye.
Lou.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
Aaron Dow.
Aye.
John votes aye. That article passes. And Article 5th, fire.
Recommend positive action to purchase fire protective equipment in the amount of $10,539.78 using the funds from the fiscal year 20 Article 18 highway front loader in that same amount. Positive action.
Yeah.
Positive action recommended by Karen, seconded by Che. Any discussion?
Yeah.
Is that one new suit?
3.
Great.
Yeah. I'm glad the front end loader came in under budget.
Any further discussion? All right, with that, we'll turn it to a vote. Karen Duvall?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Karen Dow?
Aye.
And John votes aye. Okay. Any other voting can we do tonight? We can do tonight, or do we want to turn our attention over to the FinCom letter?
I think that's it for voting.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's some cleanup voting, guys. Everybody, guys and gals, I know we've been working our tails off, and I know a lot of sacrifices made to get to this point. We're not all the way there, but we're a lot of the way there. So good work by all. I sent around a draft FinCom letter
4.29
to everybody. I'm going to post it here on the screen. And again, I'm not expecting us to, we can talk about it as much as we want tonight, but can people see it on the Zoom?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is this, if I make it wider, is that better?
Yeah, that's good.
Right there, it's real good.
Okay. So, what we did was we took I took last year's letter, obviously, and then kind of added some stuff to it. This, I felt it was necessary to make a statement about, obviously what's going on with COVID and safety. I then decided or thought that it was good to talk about this. We normally talk about it in a linear from when we make our guidelines and through the process, right? So here we talked about, we have our process and we have this annual town meeting, but I broke up the sentence that that as of the date the letter was published, town meeting is expected to be 7 p.m. on Tuesday, June 23rd, for the town moderator's notice of change letter to the residents of Topsfield dated March 30. So people can find the letter where the moderator moved the date. And then I said, please note this date may be subject to further change depending on current state emergency declared in Massachusetts and other potential orders from Governor Baker or potential changes in legislation for the Commonwealth. So I wanted it to be, we're moving forward like it's going to happen June 23rd. The warrant gets printed. Our letter, the warrant's just sort of the warrant. So our letter is that communication, that bridge. And so I felt that we needed to talk about that. I then added language about how everybody's been working very, very well together, and Governor Baker issued his order on March 12th, allowing these meetings to be taking place via Zoom and teleconferences, and we've made, the minutes stuff available so people can see that happened. Then walks through and talks about the guidelines that was given, and then it runs through how so this is all like the guidelines that was given, restating the guidelines effectively, and then mentioned that we articulated the unsustainable fundamental disconnect between the 4 to 6% increase in salary growth against the 2.5%. Just highlighting that part of the letter if people hadn't read the guideline letter. I just try to make it very factual and just a statement. Talked about how we reviewed over the winter. We were doing a review process. And then COVID happened. And then it talks about the realities of COVID began to settle in. And these weekly meetings, we had many healthy discussions on how this should affect the budget process. We took data from the Great Recession, historical pattern of tax receipt state aid, growth of budgets passed at previous town meetings, and mulled options ranging from level dollar funded, level service to essential service. And we came to a consensus that we supported a balanced level services budget with no overrides. We talk about how Town Administrator, Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee issued a joint letter to the Masconomet School Committee and how they further reduced their numbers to get to, how close to guideline. And we talked about how elementary schools reduced to, and we can update the percentages. The rest of the letter follows more of the traditional format that runs through high level. What's gone on, in terms of Masco, in terms of notable items in Article 3rd, try to call out some important stuff. And then any items over guideline, as well as what the capital items were. And then it runs through the final transfers that we haven't voted on yet, and encourage everybody to participate in a potential town moderator forum. I got to talk to the moderator if that may happen virtually or not, and then it wraps it up. And I try to keep it to the new standard of 3 pages to keep the printer bill down. So it's a start. It's not a perfect letter by any means. I did send it, to 2 folks individually just to get some preliminary feedback. So it's got some feedback in there. So it's not just my thinking, but I think it's, I think it's probably a decent start. But I only bring it up because what we'll do is we'll work on getting Mike's model 100% updated with all the final numbers, and then figure out how to drop those numbers into this letter. But on our meeting on Tuesday, we'll do our final voting, and then hopefully we can get this letter in a place. I would love to collect people's feedback on the letter. And I think traditionally we get it where it's close enough that we get the vote that allows me to make final edits, tweaks until we submit it for print. But I want to make sure that before we vote it has enough of the substantive issues discussed in a way that, has the support of the committee, and it's not just my words. So with that, any quick feedback on the letter, or
I spent a half hour on it today. I think it's fine as you write it, and I think one of the true benefits of being the chair is you get to write the letter, and we just help.
Is that the benefit of being the chair or not being the chair?
Look, you got to sell it somehow, right?
Yeah, I got to spend a little more time with it, John. But at first blush, it looks fine.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure it didn't have something.
So I think there are a couple of places where there are numbers that are needed that we should probably just highlight who needs to get those, or
I'll just call people. Mike and I are going to do a lot of it, and then
Okay.
On the sections that pertain to you, I'll just have individuals take a quick look at it, something like that.
Okay, all right, because I think, like, for example, I mean, the Masco stuff looks right. The health insurance line item we got to get, but some of them, so it's just getting those, whatever you need, let us know.
Yeah. I won't be shy. Try not to be shy. Cool. All right. With that, what else do we need to cover tonight, folks? Our meeting. Jen, you're going to post it. Yeah, Mr. Gant, 1 second. Jen, you're going to make sure our meeting's posted, so we're set for Tuesday at 7.
Yeah, it will be all set.
Okay, great. Yeah, Mr. Gant.
Yes, so I'd like to think that maybe we can get the warrant corrected, so to speak, up to date with just 3 main changes. That we're going to take out 2 warrant articles, meaning the fire and the planner, and add in the one other one for the schools. We have to take out we have to replace the one for math and focus with the technology. So I'd like to think we can get that done and approved on Monday night and delivered to you on Tuesday, a more final version 5, we'll call it, of the warrant.
So the
Does that
Tuesday
sound good to
meeting
you, Kevin?
going to be better. Then we'll actually have, if you guys can get us very close to final warrant, that's a much improved to have it in advance of our kind of close to final FinCom meeting.
So Dr. Morrison and I are already collaborating on getting the language for that technology, and I'm hoping that, I think a draft's already been circulated, so I'll start working on that either tomorrow or over the weekend.
Thank you.
We should be able to get that done Monday night.
Yeah, and vote it Monday night. Yeah, great on. Good.
All right. Any other topics? Any other business folks want to bring up? I don't think there's been much in terms of correspondence other than all of the just emails on the documents we've all been sharing on our email, but everybody's got those emails. So what do you think, Karen?
I could make a motion.
Excellent.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. When we our new roll call vote world of reality, Karen.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Lou.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
Aaron.
Aye.
I vote aye. Everybody's been working. This is a hell of a year. Everybody's working together as a team, and thank you for all the hard work and sacrifice people are making. We're not there yet, but we're close.
We're dang close.
Nice work.
Super work,
Great job,
everybody.
Kevin, and the
Thank you,
schools.
everybody.
Good work.
Super work, everybody.